let's go over the sound characteristics of these IEMs and pretty much the main aspect in why you would want to buy something of this caliber and price tag. So, just to get it out the way, the price tags for each. This is a $3,000 IEM system. This is a $800 IEM system, and this is a $1,000 IEM system. Now, when it comes to audio, the price tag isn't the final deciding factor in the performance. Yes, in theory, the more you spend, the more you should get, but it's not always the case. So let's start it off with the cheapest IEM of the bunch, the Sennheiser IE800, which is Sennheiser's current top-of-the-line IEM. The same designer responsible for the marvelous HD800s is the same one who worked on these, Axel Gregel, if I pronounced his name correctly. So the sound of these overall is rather V-shaped. It has a accentuated bass and accentuated treble in relation to the mid-range. However, this is not your typical rap canon in which it's like a monstrous bass and treble over the mid-range. This is very, very modest in comparison to something like that. So with these now, what I love about these is that the bass accentuation is focused primarily in the sub-bass region, where it has a relatively neutral and upper bass, which allows the mid-range to breathe more freely. It creates a nice little gap between the bass and the mid-range. So most of the time when there's not that much bass in the recording, you're not going to really hear much bass out of these at all, because it's mainly the sub-bass that's boosted. In terms of the detail and the rendition and the clarity, it's pretty damn good. It's a very clean sounding bass. It extends endlessly. Very superb rendition in the bass frequencies here. Transitioning over to the mid-range, the mid-range has a very open sound to it, especially for an IEM. The depth of the vocalist being in front of you is pretty good, especially for the size. I really can't stress that enough. Detail and clarity, very clean and open sound in mid-range. It's a very effortless sound in mid-range. The tonality and the timbre is very good. It has that nice sense of realism to the pitch and the vocals, the instruments, the harmonics, the decays, the reverbs. All of that sounds very convincing. It's not as clean sounding as the other two Shures, if I have to really nitpick. It's clear sounding, it's open sounding, it's effortless sounding, but it's just not as clean sounding. It has a bit of a tiny gritty texture to it, which kind of detracts from the overall sense of transparency, if I may say. Moving over to the treble, it's very airy, extends very well. Gives it a very nice open sense of, spatial imaging and the soundstage effect. The terms of the tonality, at times the treble does get a bit thin and a bit gritty and a bit raspy. It's not a lot, but on occasion it does showcase, some of its flaws in that region. It's just a very slightly gritty texture to it. It's not as clean as the Shure is. In terms of the timbre in there, it's very convincing. It sounds pretty realistic, but once again, the transparency is hindered by the fact that it's just not a very clean sound in treble. And I mean clean by the utmost standards. I'm talking about the standards of something priced in this region. In comparison to the IEMs or headphones that are much cheaper, like $300 or so, this treble is immaculate compared to those. But if I have to really nitpick, the treble on these are just not as clean as some of the best that I've heard. But it's still a very good IEM. So overall, it's a slightly V-shaped. The mid-range still has very good heft. It's not like the mid-range sounds sucked out or thin. It has very good heft to the vocals, very nice tonality and timbre, and very good, realism to the vocals and the instruments. But it's still primarily a V-shaped sound, but the bass is focused in the sub-bass region and the treble more on the mid treble region. So very clear, open, and exciting sound in IEMs, which to me, with the default filters installed on the SE846, it sounds like a very good hybrid between the KSE1500s and the SE846. So they sound like a lot of the characteristics of each of these merged into basically this. So all in all, I really enjoy the sound of these. These sound really, really good. Next up, we have the Shure SE846. Now, these are $1,000, and before the KSE 1500s were released, these were Shure's top model. And these basically took the world by storm because the predecessor to this was the SE 530, the SE 535, and the E500. They're all essentially the same. They had some slight tune-ins, but overall they were essentially the same IEMs. So back then, it was really, that design was getting old. It was a two-way, three driver, so it was divided up into bass and treble, and there were three speakers that were responsible for the sound. So you had two subwoofers and you had a tweeter. So the two subwoofers were responsible for the bass and the mid-range, and then the tweeter was responsible for only the treble. And at that time, there were a ton of three speakers coming out. Then you had four speaker three ways. Then you had six speakers. So eventually, the SE535 design was getting old, but the sound was still competent. It had really epic mid range. I still love this mid range till this day, but the bass and the treble was really lacking. It didn't have that extension, that that presence that the IEMs that were being released next to it had. So Shure came out with the SE846 in 2013. This was basically a surprise because there was really no other IEMs being released as in terms of a flagship from Shure for a while. So, like I said previously, this is a three-way, four driver, two subwoofers, one mid-range, and one tweeter, and they're all balanced armatures. The speakers are proprietary to Shure, and what really sets us apart from other IEMs, and basically all IEMs, is because it has a nicely engineered subwoofer. It has a low-pass filter, which is stunning. So to talk about the bass on these, I'm going to go ahead and say it. This is probably my favorite sound and bass presentation of anything that I've heard. Anything. Headphones, IEMs, even more so than the KSE 1500s. I prefer the bass response on these with the white filter installed. I mean, with the other filters installed, the bass is still stupendously tight and detailed, but the white filter sounds a bit more balanced with the rest of the frequency spectrum. The bass on these, just wow. They extend pretty much marvelously, just like the IE800s. They both extend very well. No noticeable roll-offs as it gets lower and lower into the frequency spectrum of the sub-bass region. The texture on these are just sublime. You pretty much hear so much from the bass notes. It's ridiculous. You can hear every individual layer, pitch, and just the reverberations as the bass is just vibrating. It's just amazing how quick the subwoofers are in these. You just hear everything and you feel it too. It's just a nice sensation that I really can't get enough of. And in terms of the integration with the mid-range, it's also pretty stunning. It does not interfere at all with the mid-range frequencies. So the mid-range is left on its own and allowed to just breathe free and just, steal the show. And what I mean by steal the show, the mid-range on these is absolutely spectacular. It has the same clarity and openness that I loved about in the IE800s, but it's cleaner sounding, which is where the IE800s kind of struggled. It just sounded a bit gritty on the IE800s, but on these, it's just immaculately clean. incredibly clean. It's also clear, but maybe not as effortless as the i800s, which sounds a bit more open and a bit more like fleshed out in terms of the intelligibility of the vocals and getting that feel that someone's in the room with you. But in terms of the tonality, these are more forward sounding. The mid range is more prominent on these. They're more luscious, more juicy sounding. But overall, I prefer the Shure's mid range because of how clean it sounds. It just has no sense of grain in the presentation. I love the intimacy of the vocals. It really sounds like you're having a one-on-one session with them. Detail-wise, is just sublime. And I mean, I love both the mid ranges, but overall, I would pick the SE846 over the i800s in the bass and mid range category. Treble-wise, with the stock filters installed, to me, the trebles just did not really have that sense of airiness. It just sounded blunt. Like everything sounded very like just cut off. It just had a very like tunnel vision type sound to it. And if you see by the frequency response of these, they don't really have much treble extension. I think this is where balanced armatures just typically struggle. They have very poor treble, extension. And as a result, these just did not have the same soundstage as the i800s. And with the white filters installed, which does boost the treble a bit, it really does help a lot with the sound, but it doesn't quite reach the soundstage of the i800s or even the KSE1500s over here. But I'll keep these bad boys for last. But soundstage wise, I still think the i800s is a bit bigger, but these sound fuller and more musical and more robust and grounded. So I still overall prefer the sound presentations of the SE846, because while the i800s are more open, they still sound a bit hazy and diffused in comparison to the SE846, which sounds more focused, and just everything has a very tight, presentation in the overall sound. And I really love these Shures. Like I adore them. They keep that beautiful mid-range that I loved about in the SE535s, but they really improved on the bass, and they improved sorry, so they really improved on the bass, and then they improved on the treble, which is the only really drawbacks that I had with the SE535s. So I really, really, really love the SE846. So overall, the SE846 has how can I say this, a very, stock wise, mellow treble. It's still very articulated, very detailed, but it's just very subdued in presentation. The mid-range is very intimate and forward, but endlessly clean, endlessly clean. Clear, detailed as well. The bass is to die for. Accentuated primarily in the sub bass, just like the i800s. Very little mid bass and upper bass boost, so the mid-range can breathe freely, but the texture, the detail, the extension, the power is sublime. I love it so much. But with the white filters installed, it's the same thing, but the treble is just elevated a bit more. So to me, it has a very nice overall balanced sound, but I do wish it had some more upper treble extension to give it more air, to kind of increase the perception of soundstage. All in all, I love these. Now the last, definitely not least, the KSE1500s. My oh my. So $3,000. I cannot get that out of my head. These are the most expensive IEM system that I know of. I believe the secondary is the JH Audio Layla, which has 12 balanced armature speakers per ear. And that's an IEM on itself. So technically, really, it's probably not even the most expensive when you think about it, because you're getting a complete system with these. Whereas the Layla is $2,500 and it's an IEM by itself. So in order to get a respectable source, you're gonna pretty much bypass you gotta go past the pricing of the KSE 1500s anyways. But off the bat retail price, these are the most expensive IEMs because you cannot buy the IEM or the amplifier separately. Sure, it does have an amplifier that's separate, but it's for traditional 3.5 millimeter based headphones or IEMs. So the KSE 1500s. how can I start here? So these run off of an electrostatic speaker. In theory, the transient response on these should be immaculate because of the design. The diaphragm is essentially massless, so it's very easy to accelerate and stop the diaphragm in relation to the audio signal. And I can hear that when listening to these because the overall sense of transparency and clarity and detail is by far the best out of all of these. And it better be because the price tag should justify something. But I'm not saying this because it's the most expensive. I genuinely believe that these are the most detailed. However, the overall frequency response of these are essentially non-existent. And I say that because can't put a I can't really label anything about these in terms of how it renders, frequencies in the sound spectrum. Everything sounds incredibly neutral. The bass, the extension, the transitioning over to the mid range, the treble, it all sounds seamless, coherent, and transparent. The bass is pretty much very flat. It's well, this is with the EQ off, of course. You can easily tailor the sound to however you want, but the stock EQ off, everything just sounds very neutral and natural. It's not neutral only on paper. Like I do agree that the Sennheiser HD800s are, but it's also natural sounding. The timbre, the tonality, everything just sounds realistic with these. The bass sounds incredibly effortless. It's just tight. It's really I can't really find any true flaws in the reproduction of that frequency. Everything sounds very detailed. Everything sounds very clear, textured, very open, very dynamic, very coherent. In terms of the presence, it's very neutral. It's not going to wow you with modern day music like drum and bass, hip hop, techno, EDM. It's just going to play those songs back as the way they were mixed down. This is not really a personal listening device in its stock form for me because the enjoyability factor just isn't the same as I get with my SE846, especially when I step outdoors and the environmental noise takes effect and the perceived bass does get reduced on these. I mean, I can always edit it on the amplifier, but however, with the amplifier, I don't really have that much volume. So by editing that, I have to reduce the volume to compensate, and it doesn't reach the volume that my SE846 so easily reaches. So in terms of the musicality and the enjoyability factor, if that was a flaw for these, that's pretty much it. It's just not as enjoyable to listen to as my SE846, but it is a superior listening experience. The mid range on these, tonality wise, it's probably like listening to water, if I can kind of give an analogy. It's just pure. It sounds very pure and just without distortion, without abnormal, any abnormal characteristics. Everything just sounds clean and pure. The overall tonality, it's just spot on. It just sounds like a human is really singing in front of you. It doesn't have that heightened, sense of intimacy that the SE846 has. It's a very linear and neutral, true to the source mid-range presentation. The IE800 on the other hand has more heft to it. So while these may sound like they have a thin mid-range, they just don't. They sound so realistic. I don't know how that was really done. It sounds warm and neutral at the same time. It's just that these sound like chameleons. They literally form themselves to the music that you're listening to. And I really love that about these. It's like these are like really a true reference set of sound tools. And I'm amazed every time I put these on. They just sound like everything disappeared from the music chain and it's just you and the music. Treble wise, it's just a very endlessly extended treble. However, it's not harsh in the slightest. It's very smooth, yet crisp and detailed. You can hear so much intricate details in the treble that really is a testimony to how incredibly fast the speakers are in here. Like there's so much small sound cues and reverberations and harmonic overlays and details and textures that just come out so effortlessly in this IEM that I really don't pick up in the other IEMs. I mean, the other IEMs are reproducing those sounds because it's like once I hear them in here, and then I go back to these IEMs and try to really focus on hearing them, I can still hear them in the other IEMs, but with these, you just hear them so easily. It's like they just pop up out of nowhere and you just hear them so easily. Whereas with the other IEMs, you don't really hear them because their sound signatures are so skewed. It really puts more effort in the other frequencies, while these are just like, they're like water. They're pure. I just can't get over that. And soundstage wise, um, I would still give the nod to the IE800s in terms of the overall space. I think it's because of those vents in the back, but the instrument separation, hands down, is the KSE1500s. These sound so focused and pinpoint. It's ridiculous. It's pretty much on par or better than my Sennheiser HD800s, in which I have high praise for in terms of imaging. Um, just overall, basically, these are like the reference gods. Put them in stock on your amplifier and the amplifier that comes with them. Just leave everything in stock and just listen to how these form to your music. If your music has a lot of bass, these will deliver. If it doesn't, you can hear the rest of the frequencies and enjoy immaculate, clear, clean, open, effortless, superbly detailed sound. And I'm not keeping these. I'm going to probably end up returning them because while I do highly enjoy the sound of these, what really killed it for me is the fact that I have to carry around that amplifier with me at all times, and it's just incredibly cumbersome. Um, and also the musicality factor, which to me I would rate as it's as important as the sound quality. These still sound superb in terms of their quality, but they are more musical. They move me more. They get my emotions pumping, which is why I prefer the SE846 out of all the other two IEMs. The other two IEMs do have certain characteristics. These have pretty much, these just do everything better in terms of the raw quality standpoint. But at the end of the day, what really matters to me, and it's just to get, just to get your body like flowing emotionally, just to connect to the music, I think the SE846 does it the best for me. It just has that nice balance between uh, the musicality and the technicality. So these are very technical, and these are also very technical, but these have good technicalities, but they're very musical, and I love that. And yes, you can EQ these with the amplifier, but they just don't have the volume to match these. They don't have the bass, power that, that overall scale and power that the SE846 has. But my oh my, these are the best sounding IEMs that I've ever heard. They are just immaculate. IE800s, the best value, obviously, of the three, because these sound superb as well, and they're the cheapest. And you can pretty much get these for as low as $600, I believe, if you get them used. So if you can get over this horrible design in terms of the ergonomics, you're in for a treat with these. It's a very open sounding, the biggest soundstage of the three that I believe. Um, but other than that, these have a very good sound. I like this V-shape sound a lot. It's a very musical sound as well, but it's just not as musical as the SE846 for me. But in terms of the bang for the buck, I would definitely give the crown to the IE800s. In terms of overall what I prefer, not necessarily what's the best, of course, the SE846, like I said previously. And if you just want the best, period, you don't care about anything else, you just want to hear every single thing in the recording, the KSE 1500s gets that notch. So, if there was anything left out in this three-way comparison, feel free to post them in the comment section below, and I will try to answer them to the best of my ability. Thanks for watching this video. Later.